Excellent. Well, I'm going to officially start the Canvass Board meeting for the Arapahoe County Clerk and Recorder Elections Division. This is for the 2020 November election. My name is Peg Pearl. I'm the Director of Elections here in Arapahoe County. And due to public health restrictions right now, we are conducting our Canvass Board meeting entirely by Zoom. And we are also live streaming it on Facebook and recording it. So it'll be on our website, arapahoevotes.com, for anybody, any member of the public or anyone else who wants to see. The purpose of the Canvass Board is to go through and look at all of the votes and reconcile the vote totals and be able to officially certify the results of the November election. So in addition to myself, we do have a couple other county employees who are helping on this today. Tom Skelly and Susan Dunlap. You won't be seeing or hearing from them much, but I want to thank them for their help with making sure that this all works today. And then we have our Canvass Board, which is historically set up as the clerk, our elected clerk and recorder, and then representatives from the two major parties. So I'm going to go around real quick and let each of them introduce themselves just briefly, starting with Clerk Joan Lopez. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joan Lopez, Clerk and Recorder. We're just so excited to wrap up this election, certify it, and I appreciate everybody being here and being a part of this. This is super exciting, and yeah, thank you.
Great. And then we'll go to Meredith. You just want to introduce yourself and who you represent on the Canvass Board.
My name is Meredith Phillips. I represent the Democratic Party of Arapahoe County.
Great. And Carol?
I'm a volunteer with the Republican Party of Arapahoe County, and I'm glad to see that our county does provide an opportunity for the public and for members of major parties to observe these functions. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and most of this will be us talking with me sharing a screen of either a PowerPoint presentation or some various charts and information. Can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation there? Great. All right. So our agenda for today for the Canvass Board meeting in general is to go through the Canvass Board oath and the duties. We're going to talk briefly just about some of the COVID-related voting adjustments and statistics. Then the specific kind of meat of our work, the November election, ballots cast versus ballots counted, reconciling, looking at those numbers so that you can certify them. Then we do put together some special reports, some supplemental reports about the cure process, rejected ballots, and our military and overseas or UOCAVA voters. And we'll want to make sure that we address your questions and discussion before certifying the official results. At any time you have questions, we'll pause and take the questions and discussion as they come on the different topics here. We are going to be following along with a official Canvass report for anybody who is watching this video or live. We have put the official Canvass report as a public document. It's available on arapahoevotes.com. And we're following along. So at times you'll see me talk about things like look at page 3 of the PDF. That's what we're talking about is the official Canvass report. So each of you, before we started today, you filled out your Canvass Board oath before today and sent it to me in writing. So we don't have to sign that in person right now. Basically, that oath, as you recall, promised to faithfully perform the duties of the Canvass Board. And in short, these are the Canvass Board duties for conducting the canvass, the specific things we're going to do today, accounting and balancing, again, those results so that you can certify them officially, and then looking at some detailed ballot logs and statements of ballots, which are some of these PDF documents you have in front of you. And also the duties of the Canvass Board under Colorado law is for you to be involved and observe in the post-election audit or risk limiting audit, which both of you were involved in last week. Thank you very much. So we successfully completed that last week. Statewide had 2 rounds and they were successfully completed at the end of last week. And also the Canvass Board does have a duty to be involved in conducting any recounts. And we will discuss recounts at the end of the meeting today, just briefly, because we do have a situation here in Arapahoe County. we will discuss those because they will be conducted in December. So briefly, I want to start first with just some adjustments about we did with voting this year because of the public health situation that we're in with COVID. And both of you were on the Canvass Board in June for our June primary election. So you remember some of these things that we were piloting and then decided to carry over in November. So I just want to kind of bring that back to you all because it does affect a little bit the way that our ballots were processed and how people voted. It changed voting behavior, right? So we did have a much increased use of mail ballots and 24-hour drop boxes. Arapahoe County added 3 new drop boxes between June and November, so that there was a total of 33 24-hour drop boxes available across the county. And we also saw a very increased use of people using the in-person drop at those vote center silver boxes. So at the front of a vote center, only during the hours it's open from 8 to 5, there's a silver box that you could come drop off your ballot. So overall, it led to a much larger number of mail ballots being returned, not necessarily in the mail, but through all these other ways instead of people voting in person. The other thing is we saw a very early voting trend. So overall, we had, you'll see 22,000 plus people vote in person. What was different was that they started voting in person the first day. So those in-person votes were not only cast the last couple of days of the election, but they did in fact extend across the entire early voting, which helped in terms of reducing crowds and the risk for public health. And also we saw a lot of increase in requests for mail ballots before the main October 9th mailing. So the big mailing goes out October 9th for mail ballots to all active registered voters. But under state law, starting October 2nd, you could come into the headquarters of your county clerk and request a mail ballot packet early. If you were going to be out of town or for other reasons that you thought you needed to get a mail ballot before the ones that were going out in the mail. We did have a marked increase of those requests. The reason that's relevant is those people, if you come in on October 5th, and ask for a mail ballot packet, your mail ballot is already in literally a pallet being taken to the post office for October 9th. So we had an increased number of folks who had 2 ballots in the stream somewhere, and we had to void them in the system, which we do, but just the extra paperwork that goes along with that. Just as an FYI. So as soon as they came in on October 5th and said, I would like an early ballot, we voided and made the other one not acceptable anymore if it was returned and gave them that new one on October 5th. But there's just a couple extra steps in both the voter registration software and in the actual paper handling if for some reason those ballots got mixed up at home and someone put the wrong ballot in the wrong envelope. Those kinds of things that we saw occasionally happening that we had to reconcile when it got back to our warehouse. We also had our curbside ballot replacement pickup service where folks could call and get a new curbside ballot picked up at 5 locations for a total of 15 days. And we offered other ways that people could vote healthy, especially on election day. We had a surge capacity of express services, drive-through lanes, and other ways that folks could come in, get a mail ballot, vote it in their car, stick it in a 24-hour drop box so that they didn't have to wait in line or have shared tablet surfaces, things like that on election day. Not only was that healthier, it meant that at places that historically are very busy, like Center Point, when we had these other types of items deployed, we had the express services and a drive-through, as well as a traditional voting center at Center Point. We had nobody in line when the polls closed at 7 p.m. at Center Point. So we had enough different ways to kind of be moving people through at one of those locations. So it kept everybody healthy. We were very happy with that. And at the same time, it was a flexibility issue for our staff for sure, because people were voting in 5, 6, 7 different ways than they normally maybe had voted. And like I said, it did involve a lot of extra work for our team to do the reconciling to get us to where we are today. So I just want to thank the team in general for doing all of that paperwork behind the scenes. But I think it was important to have that flexibility for voters in this time.
Peg,
Yep, questions?
I know that to some degree this is based around the ongoing pandemic, but mostly due to the fact that we had a very good throughput of voters at the various VSPCs. How many of these measures are likely to stay around even post-COVID?
I think there's probably a number of these that we will probably do in larger elections again. So for example, the curbside ballot pickup, where I've just put this map up for you to look at who used it where across our county. We originally started this project because, again, with the current pandemic, for people not having to come inside a vote center and to get a replacement ballot in their car. But we've heard from folks who are just elderly or who have mobility issues that it was actually a really great service that they'd love to just have all the time. So I think this is one of those things that there is definitely a way that we could keep it going in future large elections, maybe not for every election, it just depends, or depending on how you scale it up or scale it down for different elections, regardless of the pandemic. I do think also similarly, some of the things that we did on election day that we considered that surge capacity, like express services and some of the drive-throughs, also would be things that we would want to consider at least in an even year general election type of situation where we know we're going to have large turnout, just to help with that voter flow.
Thank you.
Of course. So this is just a map to give you an idea of some of the distribution of those curbside pickups. We did make sure to have it available out on the east side at Kelver Library as well for folks who needed it there. And in general, it was very similar in terms of numbers of use as in June election, when it was much more lockdown in some ways. But we definitely, like I said, we want to evaluate using this in some way in future elections for sure. There's some ways in the back end that we want to continue to improve the way that we coordinate it. Right now, the way that voters use this service is they made a phone call and they talked to someone in the voter services team to make the appointment. And then that information was transmitted to the vote center staff, which are the ones who created the ballot packet, which is where the voter picked it up from. So just that back end transfer of information, since we sort of created this process this year, we're looking for ways that will improve that as we learn from doing it a couple times. But I think as a service, it's something that there's definitely an interest in keeping around in some form going forward. Okay. Any other questions about sort of unique things that were raised about the election? You guys both know from being involved in the Canvass Board before, all of the masks and the sanitizer and all of the routines that we've been using. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time going into that here. Like I said, we were very precise in following all of those guidelines and rules from state and local health officials. We did not have problems in terms of folks that we know of at getting sick at our polling sites or in our ballot processing center. So we are very fortunate and very glad that everything that we did and put into place really helped keep people safe during the election with really historic numbers of participation. Okay. All right, then I'm going to go through the official kind of Canvass Board type of stuff now that we've put the special COVID situation to the side. This again is the PDF that I emailed earlier, and that's available on the website for other folks who want to follow along. I'm pretty much going to walk through it in order. And like I said, we can deep dive into some of the numbers wherever you have questions. So the first main category is looking at voter registration and turnout. If you're following along in the packet, this is the top of page 3. We did have historic turnout this year in terms of both numbers of ballots and a percentage of active voters who voted. So on election day, our official number for voter registration is 418,684 active voters. Now, if you looked at our final unofficial results, it was a lower number of election or of active voters for the election. That is because when we were doing our reporting, our unofficial reporting, the voter registration numbers in Colorado, because you can register to vote the same day that you vote, are constantly changing. So we have to pick a snapshot in time, basically the day before the election, and say, okay, here are the registration numbers we're going to just enter into the system as the benchmark for while we're doing our unofficial reporting. And that was the number that was entered. And then now with our post reconciliation that we can do between the unofficial and official numbers, we then pull up basically that same snapshot again as of now. So these are the numbers, the post election numbers, looking back at election day with all of that transaction that happened on election day and a little bit after, because people can turn in voter registration forms with their ballots on election day. So 418 is our number of active voters on election day. So that made us a total turnout of 84.61% of active voters. So this is the official numbers that we'll have for our turnout for this election. It is historic turnout. You can see November 2018 had a turnout of 73.5%, and November 2016, it was 83.5% about. So in terms of percentage turnout, it is definitely the highest turnout so far for the election. And also in terms of number of ballots, it's just the highest number received. So we had, in this year, we had over 354,000 ballots. You'll see the exact numbers on the next page. And back in 2016, even though it was 83%, that was only 311,000 ballots. So we actually processed over 46,000 more ballots than any prior election in Arapahoe County this election. When you take into account all the ballots that came in that we processed at least through signature verification or ballot opening, not every single one of those ended up being counted. We'll look at some of the rejections, but we processed over 46,000 more, and we counted over 42,000 more than have ever been counted before in an election. So really big numbers this election for sure. Any questions about turnout and things like that?
Yeah, considering our continued population growth and an upward trend on overall turnout, are we anticipating a need to add capacity to the elections division to be able to process more ballots in the future? Do you have a plan for when that's going to become a relevant consideration? Or is there enough capacity still available to be able to absorb the next increases coming in through just population growth or increased turnout?
So we did an adjustment this year as well. So the election division itself, in terms of full-time employees, doesn't necessarily have a plan right now to grow in terms of the county budget. But for example, this year, when we come to our election judges, who actually are the group that does a lot of this ballot processing at election time, we, for the first time, had 32 people doing signature verification at the same time this election. Which is at least 10 more people, 10 to 12 more people than had been used in any other election. Now, because of COVID precautions, we actually hired two shifts, two separate groups of 32, so that if one of them got exposed and had to quarantine, we still had signature verification judges. I'm not necessarily saying we're going to hire 64 again, but I think having that larger number as your standard number is what you need to do when you've got this many ballots, especially when we're looking at the shift between mail ballots and in-person voting, which just continues to shift the ballot towards more mail ballots. Then that is what we'll do in our election judge hiring. So we hired over 500 election judges this election, which is more than before. Part of that, again, is to have backups and to have separate shifts that don't touch each other literally ever until election day in case of quarantining. But just in general, we did definitely surge up, and I would consider that to be a plan for future to deal with population growth and such, as you're saying, is keeping those processes growing as need be.
Thank you.
The breakdown was 93.5% mail ballot and 6.46% in-person overall. That is a little higher than we were expecting for in-person, especially with the pandemic. Back in 2016, though, it was 8.5% in person. So we are still definitely shifting towards more mail ballots. And like I said, the difference this time is the in-person voting did come through all of early vote. So we had 4 times as many people come in that first week of election early voting than in 2016. So in 2016, it was still mostly everybody coming Monday and Tuesday, the last 2 days. And now we had them really shifted out. So that was an important spread to help with processing as well as with the public health. Because that way, as people were rolling in, we could take care of the ballots and keep up to date instead of having all of it come rolling in the last 48 hours. So the spreading out of the voting was definitely helpful there. Okay. And same thing with the mail ballots. The fact that our first full day of mail ballot processing, we had 25,000 mail ballots is definitely higher than we had had before. But it helped us be able to stay up to date so that by election day morning, we were caught up and had processed everything that had come in before election day on mail ballots. All right. Now I'm going to go to ballot reconciling and balancing. So this is basically our combination. You guys remember this from last time where we compare the total number of ballots actually tabulated on our voting system to the total number of ballots accepted in SCORE. And SCORE is our voter registration system where we give the voters vote credit before they go cast a ballot in person or before they actually turn in the ballot in a mail ballot. And so finding out what the difference between these numbers are. So we had doing the balancing back and forth, which is our normal process here between unofficial and official results. We had a couple discrepancies that were resolved. With the final difference being that we are right now out of 354,247 ballots tabulated, we have 12 more ballots tabulated than vote credit was assigned in SCORE. And there's a couple different ways that could to do that, to show that. So the other discrepancy while we were doing the balancing between the unofficial and the official is that we found that there was one batch of tabulated ballots. Our ballots are in batches of 100. You guys remember from RLA that was turned over and double run by a tabulator. And so that was resolved again between the unofficial and official. And that basically we matched up and showed that these were exactly the same ballots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I have the example ballot here. So does everyone see this sort of PDF ballot now? Okay. So this is a scan of the actual ballot. So there were 2 batches. It was batch 259 and 260. So if you see on the side here, there's the imprint for batch 259. And then if you scroll down, you'll see on this side, there was an imprint for batch 260. And so this is this one batch of 100 that was mistakenly turned around and run through twice. And so we were able to isolate this one batch, again, compare it in the voting systems that these were identical ballots, both physically with the ballot, this paper ballot like I'm showing you here, and also looking at the cast vote record that it was absolutely identical. And be able to, what we did is just delete this second batch 260, which was the duplicate batch, all the way across. So that just got deleted completely off the top. And it is a match, a mix, as you know, the way ballots work, we don't store, or batches aren't stored by district or anything. It's a complete mix of what was in that 100 across the way. So out of that 100, they just got deleted out. So there was no substantive effect to any particular races or recount thresholds. Things were scattered across, the 100 were scattered across there. The 2 close races that we have that are triggering possible recounts based on the threshold of possible recounts still are within that range. The county commissioner race, for example, the difference between the two candidates only changed by 2 votes. So it still keeps it in the same range. And the much larger countywide race also changed, but again, actually by less than even 100, because there were some that were blank that didn't even vote in that race, so it didn't even change. So while it changed the difference between the 2 candidates, it did not change the margin enough that it took it, at least that's a multi-county race. So all I can talk about is the Arapahoe County margin, the Arapahoe County margin. I don't know about all the other ones aren't certified, but the Arapahoe County margin didn't change in any drastic way that would kick it out of a recount if a recount is otherwise required. But I don't know about all the other 3 other counties. So that was, and then everything else was very diffuse, again, because these are all mixed up ballots. It's only a couple from different districts or whatever. And then the 12, like I said, with the missing vote credit, what we were able to track down is the 2 places we think that this occurred. One is we know that our vote centers were doing a lot of extra things, and from talking to our vote center judges, that there were some clerical errors between those voters who came in for things like express services to get that mail ballot to go to avoid COVID problems. And they sometimes got in score assigned in-person credit instead of mail ballot credit, just kind of clerical errors, because we added a lot of extra things for our vote center judges to try to do. So we appreciate that. Again, 12 ballots out of over 354,000, something got a little tweaked there in the vote credit. And then the other place is after we had some historic numbers in terms of the cure process. And after each one of those gets cured, and we had people double curing and triple curing. And after each one of those gets cured, we also run those through an audit pass to change in score the vote credit from accepted to reject, or from rejected to accepted, back and forth. And sometimes that doesn't quite click over correctly in score when the machine is reading all the barcodes. And so again, the important thing is the ballots were counted. These are not situations where ballots weren't counted. The ballot was counted, but the worst case scenario is that there is someone who it might still show, if you looked into their record, you voted, but your vote was rejected because it needed a cure, but the reality was it was actually counted. And because of the way that the ballots then get separated from their envelopes, we can't 100% trace back which 12 people those were, either from a vote center or from the cure process. So that's where we are in the tabulation. So questions about that, those discrepancies and the balancing of those. Okay. Then we'll go on to page 4 in the Canvass report, which is starting to get into the mail ballot acceptance and rejections. So this is the overall number of mail ballots accepted and rejected after cures were done. So overall, 98.8% of all mail ballots submitted were accepted and counted, and only 1.23% were rejected. And of those that needed some sort of cure that were allowed to be cured, you'll see some of the rejection codes are not allowed to be cured, but of those that are allowed to be cured, over 46% of those eligible ballots were cured by the voter. There are also some other kinds of cures where ballots were actually cured administratively by us with updated records. So we'll talk about those as well. But this is the overall numbers, is that 98.8% were accepted and counted. So this is the chart, like I said, on page 4 that lists through the types of rejections. Overall, there are some rejections that cannot be cured, but most of the ones that we'll focus on, I'm sure that your questions are the kind that cure. We did have a total of 8,200 letters that were sent during the whole process, starting in early October, for either a missing signature, a missing ID, or a signature discrepancy. And one of the things we want to keep in context for a presidential election and the unique context of this year's presidential election, where again, we saw some effects of COVID, and I've talked to other counties locally about this as well, is especially in the missing ID and some of the discrepancy situations. So between October 9th and election day, we had about 15,000 online voter registration updates. And about a third of those were either brand new or they were reactivating and inactive. So all of those are ones that either have one signature on file or sometimes, depending on how it's set up, no signature on file. And if there's no signature on file as a reference, you have to send out a letter because we have no reference signature. If you've never voted before and you did an online registration, so there's no signature attached to your voter registration, we have to send you a letter. So the online voter registration, because there weren't in-person voter registration drives over the summer because of COVID, really does affect that record setting up a little bit. Also, we know this year, starting in July, automatic voter registration went into play, where people who started doing things at the driver's licenses and other things got automatic voter registration. That also can trigger and make you either ID required or a signature required, depending on how that, because that just comes to us internally through the Department of Revenue. Again, I talked to some other local counties and they all saw an uptick in this as well, linked to when AVR came in, missing IDs. Yep, Meredith, question.
So I just want to make sure I'm clarifying for anybody who's listening here. 8,200 letters is roughly twice as many as ballots were rejected overall here. So you're saying that those automatic letters that got sent to people who had no signature library, their ballots were still accepted and counted there. They just had a notification sent to them that what exactly? What was the notification?
Yes, good, thanks. So these were the letters that were sent out saying that either there was a missing signature, like they forgot to sign their ballot, or that they needed to provide a copy of their ID because their voter registration file didn't have an ID on file, or that they needed to do a signature on the cure notice because they didn't have any signatures on file. And so, yes, so then, like you said, more than half of these were actually counted over the course of the month, because a couple things happened. And this is why I was kind of explaining the automatic voter registration. So the letters went out to the voters themselves, and the voters could then send back to us a copy of an ID or a signed notification cure affidavit. What also happened is we got updates on identification. So for all the folks who either through automatic voter registration, or if someone had to register using their social security number because they couldn't get a Colorado driver's license because there weren't appointments to be able to get them because of COVID, they start out as needing an ID. So maybe by the time they voted in early October, they were flagged as you need to give us an ID. But we got updates from the Secretary of State's office through what we call the HOB list, which is an interstate ID verification, government database verification. And we got those lists updated up through the 2nd of November, so the day before Election Day, of people who were then verified, whose ID were verified through the state cross-checking of other state databases. And so we administratively were then allowed to make those people have ID compliant ballots and count those ballots, even if they did not send the form back. So there was some administrative curing that could happen because of that government ID check. And some of those folks were people who came in because of they had to use their social security number because they couldn't get a Colorado driver's license. And that's where we do an administrative check in government records. It just is a couple weeks delayed. And because folks were being so great about early voting, they voted early in October, and we held those ballots while they were still ID pending. But then the ID was corrected through the government channel as opposed to the voter channel for some people.
Okay, so
ballot was counted.
Great. I just want to follow up on that for a couple ways. First of all, the letter that was sent, the 8,200 letters there, that is the same letter to all these people, or at least the letter saying there's an issue with your ballot, with your ID or your signature, so on and so forth. So it does say, even to people who you ended up not rejecting through the administrative process, they were still notified that they had a problem with their ballot. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Then when they were corrected administratively through this HA process, or other processes that have gotten them, were they notified that their ballot had been accepted by your office?
So they weren't notified by letter, but if they checked their status on Go Vote Colorado, the status would be changed then from rejected to accepted. And then also if they were looking at their name on the cure list and they next day on the cure list, their name would be removed.
Okay, so that was my next question. On the CE 77, these people would show up there until they were administratively cured by your office.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. They were still pending. They were pending an ID approval, an ID satisfaction. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So then, as we were saying, that was the initial number, and we also send those letters out starting in early October. So there were a lot of folks who got those notices because they voted early, got the notice very early in October, but we saw that they still hadn't cured by election day. They just lost the letter or weren't paying attention. I don't know. But we send them out within 2 days of when the signature is actually looked at. So we send them early. We don't hold them and wait. The only ones that come very late at the end of election day are the people who voted on election day. We're otherwise caught up on all those letters. We send letters every day, all through the month of October.
And that cure list is also being updated throughout the month of October.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was once a day. So some people had, 4 weeks to cure, possibly. So we did overall have 46% that were cured. I said here cured by the voter. So this doesn't count those administrative cures that we did. So the rate would be even higher. But for voters actually curing, it was 46% cured by the voter. And you can see that's a much higher rate than in November 18, where it was 26%, and November 16, where it was 37.7%. So we did have a lot of voters who are involved with curing. And I do think that one of the reasons those numbers are much larger is we do in the cure process here in Arapahoe County for a number of years, but for this election, the state took it over, had the text to cure program. So you see on the slide, 65% of voters cured using that text to cure program, which is on the mobile phone. It has just become the most popular way to do it. It is certainly easier. And like I said, Arapahoe County's been already using it for a few elections, but this election, the state took over the contract and made it statewide, which changed a little bit of how we did it administratively on the back end because everything went to the state first and then had to come to us. So there was a little bit of delay in processing, but our voters in Arapahoe County were used to it as an option. So that was good. They took advantage of that. In fact, Arapahoe County was the top user of text to cure in the state this election. So we definitely did that. We also had a lot of people not trusting the US mail. And I highlighted this here. We had 2% actually, despite the pandemic and not wanting to vote in person, came in person to cure. And part of, again, why this was interesting is a lot of these folks actually did come to a vote center to cure their ballot. And fortunately, a lot of them actually came on like Monday and Tuesday, which were busy days, thinking they needed to cure before election day. And I'm not sure why, because the letter and everything said until they had November 12th, but they were just worried. But they came in person to cure. So it made, again, a little bit of a delay in the processing of the paperwork, just because on the letter, it says, if you do want to cure in person, bring it to our elections warehouse, which is where the cure process happens. But the fact that we had people turning in cure paperwork to election judges at a vote center just meant that it got kind of put in with their daily reconciliation paperwork, which then goes through a different channel of people to come back to us. We got it all, but it maybe wasn't as quick as if it had come to us directly. And I know that just made some people nervous because they wanted it to kind of immediately show up in their record. And it was maybe a 2-day delay because we were getting the paperwork and getting that done. Even if you do the text to cure, it's not an immediate change in your record because what happens is it still needs to come to our office. Our office needs to print that out. And we have all of these ballots put aside. They're not even unopened yet. We have to match it up and find your actual ballot and make sure to match your paperwork up so that we have your ballot done correctly, and then be able to scan it, run it through the process again. So as much as people love the text to cure mobile phone, it's not actually like an immediate cure, like it's going to show up in your record that day, because it does still then rely on 2 or 3 steps of people at the warehouse physically processing the paper and the ballots as well. But definitely people do love that. One thing that isn't on the letter, but people figured out, which maybe we'll just put on the letter, is people also put their cure paperwork in our 24-hour drop boxes, as long as those were open. That actually comes to the warehouse a lot more directly than giving it to the center judge. But putting it in an envelope and putting it in a 24-hour drop box, our ballot security judges are out there picking that stuff up once a day, and it comes right back to the warehouse.
But only before the election.
Before the election, right?
Okay.
And because we're sending these out in October.
Right. Okay.
So
I have some questions here if you're done with this section.
yeah, I'm just looking to see if there is, I think, yep, this is the place to go to talk about it. And there's
Okay.
on, if you look in your PDF, there's the more detailed type of cure paperwork or more detailed statistics than what I put on the screen too. You know, there's a lot of statistics in the PDF, but yes, ask questions. I can put it up here if you'd like, but ask.
Sure. So to some extent, this is going to be a kind of a joint set of questions that you can only answer some of, because there's the SOS is involved in this very heavily at the moment. So one of the issues that we encountered during the cure period, post-election cure period, was a consistent amount of confusion regarding whether or not a given cure was successful. Now, hearing about the delay, especially from the text to cure, really helps. But is it feasible for there to be either a daily list of successful cures published along with the CEO 77, or is it possible to notify voters through text who use text to cure that their cure was successfully completed? Is that something that you can do from either your office, or is it technically feasible within the Secretary of State's purview?
So I will say, first of all, from our office, technically, we can't send anything out through text to cure. That is not, it's not set up that way. We can't use it to blast anything out to people. So the way text to cure works, as you know, is people have to text a word to that code in order to get the link sent to them. So we can't use it to communicate back to them in any way.
Is that only because, sorry to interrupt, but is that only because you don't have control over the whole software package, or is it just because of the nature of the system?
Well, right now, both. But I honestly don't know if the system is, it's not meant to be a two-way communication device, is my understanding. So it's not. So I don't know if that's in the background somewhere for future development, but at least as of now, my understanding is it doesn't have the capability to be that sort of two-way communication. Then in terms of getting information back to the voter, like I said, when we get a cure, we have to get the cure paperwork. We have to find the ballot. We have to make sure it matches up, that the person actually did everything they're supposed to do on the cure paperwork, and be able to then go in and match those two up and find the physical ballot, and then go into both the ballot software and the score registration software to be able to change the credit, as need be for people. So I guess part of the question is, and these would just be policy questions about when is it that you tell the voter? Do you tell the voter yes, I have it, we're working on it? Or do you tell the voter, I have it and I'm working on it, and then 2 days later have to tell them it's done? Or, which it's very, it's a moving point in time, especially when you have certain periods when you're getting thousands of cures a day. Our goal is to get through them all by the end of the day, and then the next day's list goes up and it has subtracted anybody. So if your name's not on the list, that means yours worked, and we went through everything from yesterday. So I don't know, and the way the current voter registration database works is once your ballot is accepted for counting, you're just in the same bucket as everybody else's ballots who were accepted for counting. So there isn't necessarily a special list that I can pull necessarily that says you were accepted because you went through a cure and were accepted versus you were accepted that went the other way. So I'm not sure there's a list, like you're saying, a list of successful cures that's built into the system right now that's able to be posted, as opposed to the list that we have of people needing cures. And so then if you're no longer on the list needing cures, that means your cure worked. Not right now, the system has a companion list.
Okay. Well, within the scope of your office, is it possible to generate that list?
I'm not sure that it is. Like I said, I don't know that I would have to go look at all the search parameters, and I wouldn't want to try to speculate about that right now.
Okay.
I have a specific question that might address that too, and that is, just because I'm not terribly familiar with it, but as we do ballot tracker, or we're checking on our ballot, it seems like we get an answer saying perhaps it's been accepted. Maybe a couple of days later, we see that it has been counted. If somebody just sees, boy, I have a long gap in there, is there any way of, if it's needing to be cured, is there a category for that?
So for ballot tracks, that is really just that we've received your ballot and we're working on it. And so then that is, if you get a cure notice, you know you need to cure. But if you don't get a cure notice, you don't need to cure. It's just moving through the process.
So there's no update in ballot track that says counted, secure, no cure needed, versus one that says cure needed, cure pending, that sort of thing.
Right. We don't have, because ballot tracks doesn't talk to the cure software, we can't have those two it would give out of date information about a cure. Because
that's what I wondered.
To cure, for example, they're two separate programs.
Is there a technical fix to that, or is that a administrative barrier?
Well, right now they're two totally separate programs that were like separate vendors. And until the state took it over, not many counties even had both of the programs running. They only had one, the program or the other. So it's probably one of those things where as we move forward, these things will be more integrated as a way to communicate with your voters. But we really are just getting to the point where a lot of counties were using this for the very first time. Both for the very first time.
Great. Couple other questions there. A specific question in the CE 77. What does verification affidavit not complete mean?
So that is the affidavit that folks have to complete either from the cure process of a mail ballot, or if you're a UAPAVA voter, someone voting through the secure ballot portal who has a certain verification affidavit that they have to complete and sign. That means that it is that the person either didn't sign it, they left it blank, or they didn't actually fill it in all the way. So we are not allowed to accept it if it doesn't have those items on it. It definitely can't accept the ballot.
Is that curable in some sense by completing that affidavit? Or if it's not set, then is it?
In general, yes. So it just depends on like the situation of when we get it and things as well. So if it's sent at midnight on the last day, or I don't know, it would depend on the situation, but that's required in order to be able to cure the ballot. So if you turn in your cure affidavit but you don't sign it, then it isn't cured.
Okay. All right. So, and then this is you probably have covered a lot of this, but I want to make sure I understand this all in one place here. How information moves in the text to cure process between the different offices and pieces of software involved. So how does information get to you from text to cure?
So the information goes from text to cure to the Secretary of State. And then the Secretary of State will put the information in a secure FTP site that runs between the Secretary of State and the counties. And then the counties have to be able to pull that down from the secure FTP site and then be able to start printing and processing.
So you're generating from what the Secretary of State gives you, you're generating essentially a list of people who are attempting to cure. Then you go through your internal processes at the warehouse to pull the ballots, get all of the paperwork together, and see if what the voter has provided to you is adequate to cure their ballot.
Right, and it's not it's series of documents. So it's like getting the scanned documents itself. It's not necessarily a list.
Okay. Also, it's a set of scanned documents you have to and then you generate a list from that, or you generate some kind of workflow internally from what you're getting from. Pardon me. This is
Right.
From a Secretary of State, which you then use to pull what you need to then attempt there. So you're processing then from those scanned documents to find the ballots, and then compare the scanned documents to what you would need to cure them. And if that is inadequate to cure the ballot, if for some reason something's not right from the voter side, do you just kind of stop with that there, or do you just add them back into the cure list?
Depending on what it is, like if someone didn't, I guess some of it just depends on what it is. So if it was a missing ID and somebody didn't send the ID,
Mm-hmm.
then that's not cured. And so they would stay on the cure list as needing to cure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there, and we've already gone over the fact that there's no further attempt to contact the voter if that attempt has failed in some fashion. If say the ID is unreadable, or it wasn't a valid ID, or so on and so forth. Like, let's say they put an expired ID in, for instance.
I would have to check and see. I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure if there's an expired ID or if just I do know, like, for example, people who cure by email, if the attachment doesn't come through, they've emailed us, so we have some way to contact them back, and that there is some correspondence that happens. So every situation is a little different.
Okay.
I can't give you a blanket statement. I do know the text to cure documents that come to us don't necessarily come with a way to contact someone back. So the way that the law says that we have to contact people about cures is we have to send it by mail.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they have an email address with us, which is not required under the voter registration file, we send it by email. But not everybody has an email or a phone number with us. So we don't necessarily have that information, and text to cure doesn't necessarily give us additional contact information unless we have it on file with the voter. So that I can't tell you for sure blanket, because things come in different ways. Obviously, if someone walks in person, for example, we will have a conversation with them. An ID, I need this, so everyone's a little bit different.
Okay. So if you happen to have, say, a phone number and email on file when somebody's going to go through the text to cure process, and you can verify that, is there a standard procedure for trying to communicate with them if their text to cure attempt fails?
I would have to check and see, because I think it again depends on the circumstances.
Okay. All right.
Not anything.
And Meredith, I think it has to do with, time constraints too, as well. We're not required to contact them an additional time. But I think most of my staff, and I know it has happened, that they will reach out if there is time. It just depends, like Peg said, it depends on the situation.
Okay. Then another question about the election results updates to score. Is it feasible to publish a schedule of when those updates go into score?
I'm sorry, what election updates?
The CE 68. Is that something that you can at least publicly release a schedule of when you are sending that information back into score, or is that a rolling basis?
So we are updating score all day, every day.
Okay.
So for us, that's when we put things on our website. And when we say we're pulling things once a day, it's a snapshot time of once a day.
Okay.
So that timestamp is on our website of the version that we pull on our website.
Okay. So it's just sounding to me like there's a lot of technical barriers to being able to consistently contact voters who are going through the cure process for a variety of reasons. You may not have contact information, you may not have staff time or the bandwidth for that. So it does seem like there needs to be some changes made to the way that the cure software and score interact and so on and so forth. But it's good to get clarification on how the process is working right now. Thank you.
Any
I
other?
have a question that might be related in here too. When we need something cured, it's based on the information you're seeing on the outside of the envelope before it's been opened. Is that right?
That's true. These envelopes are still sealed. Yes.
Still sealed because it's basically the signature on the outside. So does this mean until it's been cured, we still have not opened the envelope?
That is correct. They stay sealed and they get wrapped up in anyone that wasn't cured just gets wrapped up and stored as an election record, still sealed and never opened.
Thank you for answering that. Just so if anybody ever, for the record later on, comes back and looks at this, I want folks to not be worried that what if there are election judges there from one party and they see which candidate got a vote and they go, oh, it needs cured. We're determining this before we have any idea how this person voted.
Literally
Yes.
impossible to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's
I
no.
knew that. I just wanted to hear it said for anybody else who might question that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, and there's no political party affiliation or anything in that stage of the information as well.
Wonderful.
Yeah. The election judges don't have access to any of that information. Nope. All right. Moving on. So then going to page 5 of your document, we're going to talk about some of the other unique types of ballots. So provisional, statewide, and duplicated ballots. These are also ballots that we were processing during that 8-day period. Provisional ballots obviously come in usually on election day at a vote center. Provisional ballots, we did get more than we expected. We had 37 provisional ballots across the county. And the main reason one of the main reasons we saw an uptick about this was folks who wanted to just vote for president, but were not in Colorado. At 22 days is the residency requirement for Colorado, for voting in Colorado. But by some court cases and some rulings, if you have been in Colorado for less than 22 days, you are allowed to vote for president under federal law. You just can't vote for any Colorado things. So we did have some folks who voted on a provisional ballot for just president. Now, that's a Colorado ruling and a Colorado rule. Some of the rejected ballots that we had, and you can see the chart on page 5 in your packet, is we had voters here who were in Colorado for some reason on election day from other states, Texas, Hawaii, other states, who just wanted to vote. And they were residents of the other state. They admit they were residents of the other state. They just happened to be here and they hadn't voted in their home state. So we gave them a provisional ballot. But then based on the research and talking with the Secretary of State and everybody else, those votes cannot be counted. That's a Texas vote or a Hawaii vote or whatever, but they can't vote here. So those were rejected as not a resident of Colorado. So that's the difference for those there. We also rejected some where we had people who came in on election day and they were worried because they had put their mail ballot in a drop box from like Douglas County or Jefferson County. And they had put it in on election day and they just weren't sure if it was really going to get to us. They didn't understand the process enough to know that we swap the day after election and all of those are considered approved. So they came in and voted a provisional ballot as well. So this is the reason why we count provisional ballots last Friday after all of the other ones are done, because then those were rejected because we did have their mail ballot from Douglas County or Jefferson. We counted the mail ballot and then the provisional ballot was never unsealed and it was just rejected. But so that's, we had kind of an influx of numbers of provisional ballots. Those were the two main reasons we saw. Then we had statewide ballots, and statewide ballots are new this presidential year. And this is a ballot which just had president, senator, and the statewide ballot measures. And these were just from people who are Colorado residents, Colorado voters, but in the wrong county. So if we received a Douglas County voter who came to an Arapahoe County vote center, we would issue them a statewide ballot where they could vote for president, senator, and statewide ballots measures and not have to go get to Douglas County before 7 p.m. And then after the election, we seal those up. Well, we seal them up after they vote. And then after the election, within that cure period, we give that ballot to Douglas County. And Douglas County processes it and counts it as a Douglas County ballot. So we received 586 statewide ballots from other counties. So those are Arapahoe County voters who voted somewhere else in the state. We had to process those after the election, 586. And then we issued 193 to people who came to Arapahoe County, but were really voters from other counties, which then we did the paperwork and sent out to those other counties so that they could process those ballots. So that is the statewide ballots for this election that we had to process. And again, it only affects those top line races. And otherwise we have to check their eligibility, that they are eligible Colorado voters. The final category is duplicated ballots. And so if you look on page 6 of your packet, there's the chart of all the reasons why we had to duplicate ballots. One of the big categories is always the overseas and military voters who vote by the secure electronic portal. And so those get printed out just on regular paper and we have to duplicate them to be an official ballot. Now, duplicated ballots are created through a bipartisan team, a Republican and a Democrat, who work together on either a ballot marking device or a paper ballot to recreate exactly what the voter said on the electronic ballot that just can't be read by our ballot scanners. Or we have damaged ballots that can't be read by our scanners and they have to make an exact duplicate that can go through our scanners. You'll see some of the reasons are like that it was marked in red ink, other kinds of things that happen. The biggest number of, besides the normal, what we expect UOCAVA overseas voters, is we did have some machine damaged ballots. So if you recall, I said the very first day we were processing mail ballots, we received 25,000 mail ballots, much bigger than usual. So our first batch of ballots, after they go through signature verification, they run through our Agilis machine again, which is what slits open the bottom of the envelope and then goes to ballot opening. So one batch or one rack is about 4,000 ballots. And so the very first rack, we did not know until it got to ballot opening that when the first setting of the envelope opener was opening envelopes, it was not on every ballot, but on a number of ballots, it created, you'll show on this little screen here, a little nick in the side of the ballot. The letter opener did that in the first batch. And we didn't know that until the ballots were actually opened, that we could see that it did this. And so once we saw it when the ballots were opened, we could immediately go adjust the machine. It didn't happen again. But because we had so many ballots in that first batch, we did end up with a total of, a couple thousand that had this sort of little nick in the side that couldn't quite get read by the scanners because it was too close to those timing marks, those little squares on the side. And so we had to duplicate those in the first batch. Also, then we have voter damaged ballots. I wanted to give you a couple examples of these because these are always interesting. First are things that are done on purpose. You'll see this ballot, the voter actually purposefully cut all the edges off, all of the timing marks and everything. People, I don't know if they think that it maybe has secret code in it or something, but they sometimes purposefully cut things off of their ballot. And so we have to duplicate these. And then we obviously, like I said, we use the bipartisan teams to faithfully update all of these ballots to be exactly the same. And then the one that warms my heart, with a note, my dog ate my ballot. Please process as much as you can. I'm unable to go vote in person. Near and dear to me, because I did have a puppy eat a ballot once myself in my own house. It was not voted yet, but still. So as you can see, most of the dog damage is in the instructions. So luckily we did have a bipartisan team who was able to reproduce all of these votes on both sides of the ballot that were not eaten by the dog. So we spend a lot of time trying to help voters that way. We have things that come in with wines spilled on them, coffee spilled on them, etc., and we have to duplicate those as well. But I appreciated the actual note that it was from the dog. The voter did not want to say it was them, it was the dog. So. Any questions about the duplicated ballots? Okay. So the last major category that we want to make sure you always have a little info about is our overseas and military ballots. This is in page 8 of your packet. We did have over 4,000 of those ballots sent by mail or email link to the secure portal, and we had over a 70% turnout. So we do usually see a higher turnout in presidential years, and we did indeed as well this time. 2,689 are issued through electronic means like that email link and such to the secure portal. The rest are sent by mail. But even if people get a mail ballot as their preferred way to receive it, a lot of them end up returning their ballot through the secure portal electronically, just because maybe based on the timing or whatnot, that's what they decide to do. Our military and overseas voters do have those extra days. If they choose to mail the ballot, it can come in during the cure period up till November 12th. If they are returning it electronically through the secure portal, it still has to be received by 7 p.m. on election day. As you'll see, if you look on page 8, there are also that affidavit, which we discussed before, has to be submitted through the secure portal. If it's not signed, or we have sort of a cure process that goes back and forth with the UOCAVA folks as well during those 8 days to do us if the missing signature needs to be filled in. They just do all of that by email. They don't usually come in person, obviously, but we do have that cure opportunity for folks if they need it for their process as well. Any questions about the UOCAVA votes? So then what I wanted to do is go and, before I get to the statutory recounts, we have our official summary report. This is the canvass report.
Peg, before you, oh, sorry. I was wondering
No,
if Carol was still on phone. I was wondering if we could pop take about a 30-second break.
Sure, we can take a break. I'll get to the right
Thank you.
on here. Summary report. So besides all of those specific statistics that we've looked at in terms of the number of ballots counted and cured and discrepancies, we now just have our official results, which is what you all are going to be certifying. So this is sent in the packet, but I just want to scroll through a little bit here so that you can see this is the official summary report. When we're done today, and once you've certified the results, this is what we'll be sending to the Secretary of State's office, and we'll be updating on our website, which is sort of the public portal to see it, but this is the official document. So these are our official numbers for the November election. Like I said, we're at the 84.61% turnout, and the breakdown of mail versus in-person votes there. And then this goes through all of the races, starting with president, and you'll see at the top of each of these, if you're interested, it tells the total number of ballots that have that particular race on it. So these are based on putting voter registration numbers into the precincts. So the county-wide races have the full number, but for example, when you drop down to some of these districts, you'll see the number shrinks. And that's because obviously less people got those ballots. And so some of these are much smaller. And so we have all of these official results will go up there on the website and turned in to there. This is the judicial district race here. You can see when we did the change with the discrepancy, the totals changed a little bit here. For Amy Patton, it went down by 55 votes when we got rid of the one misbatch, and by John Kellner, it went down by 40 votes. And then we go down to RTD and our county commissioners. Again, here is Commissioner District 3, which is
Peg,
the other one.
excuse me, Peg,
Yep.
before you go any further, are you referring to the batch of 100 that you were talking about early in our meeting here that was run through twice? And so you had to look at that and that accounted for some, but that's kind of a strange proportion. Does that mean out of that batch of 100, 40 people had voted or 20 people had voted for John Kellner and it got counted as 40?
No, so it was, yeah, and sorry, it is that same 100 that we were talking about, the misrun batch. So out of that 100 that had to be deleted of duplicate ballot votes, there in that 100, there were 40 votes for John Kellner, there were 55 votes for Amy Patton, and there were 5 votes that were just blank in that race.
Right.
Not everybody votes every race.
I'm sorry. I thought you said Amy Patton's went down by just like 5 votes.
No, 55.
Okay,
Sorry, I
so
was-
55 and 40 are same ballpark. I thought 5 and 40 seemed
Yeah.
strange for such a close race.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry if I wasn't clear enunciating, but that's why I told you the margins didn't really change much. It was very,
Right. That's what I expected too. Yeah. Thank you.
sorry, I was not clear. And then here in the Commissioner District 3, which is the other very close race that we had here, the difference between these two votes, it was a difference of 165 with the duplicate votes. When we took that one duplicate batch out, it's just a difference of 167. So it changes by 2 votes. So, because there weren't that many votes in that district, it's a much smaller district. It was not all 100. And then these are all the judges, lots of judges, and the ballot measures. These are all the official results you have in front of you and will be on the website. I'm just scrolling down to get to the next part of the official results, which is, here we are, the statements of votes cast. So the statement of votes cast, this is the other document that you as Canvass Board get a copy of and to review. And this is the number of registered voters and the number of votes cast by precinct. So again, this is where we just, because the registration numbers are always changing, we take a snapshot in time, but we took that snapshot on Friday, looking back to Election Day, to try to get these numbers as exact as possible. So if you wanted to see turnout of particular precincts, you can see some precincts had very high turnout. And then we also, as you can see, have some very small precincts just because of precinct splits and some larger precincts. In general, going into next year, which is a redistricting year, all of these precinct lines, almost all of them are going to change because all of our districts, all the lines are going to be changing next year. We have some precinct splits and changes that have been done over the last 10 years because of new districts or because of new development that have been built, whole new developments in Arapahoe County, housing developments that have been built, and we've needed to add them to the address library, and we try to kind of fit them in as they grow. Once every 10 years is when we can kind of reset and make things a little more orderly again, and then they will slowly get a little messy over the next 10 years again as things grow. So that's what this is. This is just precinct by precinct, number of registered voters to the votes cast. where you can compare that. And it goes all the way down to the end where you will see the totals match up. There we are. The totals match up again to that same number of 418,000 registered voters, and then the same number of ballots that we counted. So this is where all the numbers just match up here. And these two documents that you're looking at here are from our voting systems, as opposed to some of the other documents you saw in the charts. The source is from SCORE, the statewide voter registration database. Does anyone have any questions just about those two sort of official charts and how those will be turned into the Secretary of State? Okay. Then the last thing I just want to touch base on is the statutory recounts. So if I can switch over back, here we are, to the recounts. So County Commissioner District 3, this is wholly within Arapahoe County. So if you, with what we've just gone through over the last hour plus, the final official margin in that race is 0.408%. Our statutory recount threshold is 0.5%. So this is within the range of statutory recount. So after we certify and all the certification documents from today are sent to the Secretary of State, the Arapahoe County Clerk will issue a notice of recount for this race. That'll be a notice that goes out publicly and goes out to the two candidates in the race. District Attorney for 18th Judicial District, we do not yet have the final official results. While we are certifying right now, it is a multi-county race. It takes 4 counties. So we will have to wait till all 4 counties do that certification. And then the calculation can be done. Because it is multi-county and it is a state office, the Secretary of State will be in charge of doing that final calculation and issuing any notice of recount. And the deadline will be November 30th. As of right now, if our certified results plus the other counties don't change from their unofficial, it will be in that recount range, but I don't know what the other 4 counties are all going to do, so we shall wait and see. But that will issue from the Secretary of State's office on the 30th. Because of that, both recounts, if they're both necessary, will be conducted at the same time and just follow the timing and the rules established by the Secretary of State. So we will not be setting up a separate process for District 3, Commissioner District 3. We're just going to roll it in to whatever gets set up for the multi-county. If for some reason the district attorney race does not go to a recount, then we will set up our own timing and our own rules under the statute for Commissioner District 3. But we will know all that by November 30th. And the Canvass Board, you must participate in a new logic and accuracy testing and recount and certification, all of which kind of mini little versions depending on what set of rules we follow. But there will be a form of each one of those along the way. And the deadline to complete all of that process will be December 8th. So really it's going to be between December 1st and December 8th that the process will happen for one or both of those races.
Excuse me, do we know what date the other 3 counties are having their canvass meetings?
Well, I know the deadline to have your canvass meeting is this Wednesday, and I know at least some of them are having it tomorrow. So there will definitely be, like I said, the deadline is this Wednesday. So everybody is basically today and tomorrow mostly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I don't have too much details about this yet, but we will at least go forward with the notice for our in-county one and get that started. And then we will see what we hear from the Secretary of State when the other counties are certified. All right. So that is the end of everything that we need to do in our presentation and all of the numbers that you need to go through and reconcile. Any other questions, concerns, issues that you want to make sure that we discuss before I will send you the certification, like I said, by email for everyone to sign off on and then combine together as a document. But this is our chance to have any other conversation or discussion of issues.
Yes, Peg, I would like to ask, just so you can give an answer for anybody else to hear. You've already given me this answer. I think I have it worded just right here. After our discussion last Tuesday, have you had anything that you've learned since last Tuesday that would cause you to lose confidence in the Dominion system providing accurate data for Arapahoe County?
No, we have not. We have no issues with our software. We have confidence in our voting system. We have a system here in Colorado that involves having the logic and accuracy testing before the election, where we compare a hand vote to the tabulation results. And then after, the bookend is afterwards, we have that risk limiting audit that we just conducted last week, which you were a part of, to again compare hand votes to the tabulation votes. And so we've had multiple years and multiple elections with that, and similarly had successful results of all of those tests this year, and did not notice anything else that would give any evidence or concerns to our process and our voting systems in Arapahoe County or in Colorado this election.
Thank you. I was glad to hear that last week when we were having our risk limiting audit meeting. And just with anything else happening in the news in the last few days, if anything else had changed from last Tuesday to now, I'd want to know it before we signed off. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Real quick, can you go over the results, or at least the how many ballots to pull for the round 2 of the RLA, and then the results from Arapahoe County?
Sure. So round 2 of the statewide audit, which we had on Thursday, I believe we pulled 35 ballots. It was around 35 ballots for that. And we had no discrepancies in Arapahoe County and ended up having no discrepancies for the whole state in those audited contests either. So that's why the audit was closed and all finalized.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions or discussion points? Clerk Lopez, anything that you want to add?
I just wanted to add with Meredith, I know that there's been a concern as far as the cures and how the list comes out and the follow-up and so on and so forth. But I would highly recommend that you reach out to the state and tell them your concerns about the curing, since of course they've taken over now, and then just let them know what the issues were and what you ran into. I definitely would do that, and I'm sure that they would look at that and maybe even, you know, make sure it's a better process.
Yeah, I think there's some room for improvement there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does need.
But
I
I
agree.
think that some of the clarifications you gave me today, the Peg gave today, that will be helpful going forward in designing a better process that won't be unduly burdensome on your office, and will make sure that voters get the best information they possibly can, as close to a timely fashion they possibly can.
Yeah, just even mentioning it to them and putting it forth to tell them what kind of problems you've had, they're definitely going to be open to try to make it easier and the whole process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just have full confidence in just reaching out and letting them know what the issues were.
I mean, consider this was the first time we ran the statewide system this way. I think it was a decent success. Obviously, there are still tweaks to be made.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree.
we're always looking to get more information to voters as we can. We always have to look at juggling the balancing the needs in the system too, of making sure that our statewide voter registration database is as secure as possible. So we don't usually want that to be communicating and touching directly technology wise with other apps that are not controlled by the state and maybe don't have the same rigor in terms of cybersecurity and things like that. So no matter what it is, we know there's always going to be a two-step process because we want to balance the security of our database. So we're always looking to, especially the year after an election, talk through how we can try to make those things work together without compromising security at the same time as increasing the voter flow of information for sure. So I'm all on board for that.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to certify this election. I can't stand it.
Okay.
I mean, it went smooth and awesome. I mean, there was, a lot of news and craziness going on, and, we thought there was going to be fires everywhere. But honestly, the communications team, the elections team, Peg is super organized. I mean, there was just so many things and obstacles that we had to go through. I have to say, it just was so smooth. It was scary. But thank you guys for being a part of this, especially my first presidential election. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Peg, for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah, big shout out to the way you handled election day. For that to be as smooth as it was remarkable and testament to your team.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I appreciate our whole team, and I will pass all the kudos along to all of them who made it work on the registration side and the election processing of ballots side. Absolutely. So, all right. So I think what we will do is we will officially close this meeting, and then I will be sending you guys the certification by email. So again, we will have this recording available on YouTube. It'll be on our website as well as the packet, if anybody wants to go along with that or take a look at that weeks from now or whatever, that'll be available. So Tom, I'm going to have you go ahead, and I'm going to have Tom sign us off of Facebook. Everybody.
One thing before
Hi,
that,
Facebook.
will the certification, the actual documents, will that be made available on all of the websites and everything too? Or where can people find that if they want to find the actual certification that we're going to be doing in the next couple minutes?
Yeah, so the whole report is available on our website, absolutely. And then we can go ahead and put the scanned version of the signed certification that you guys are doing. We can put that up there too. That's a public document as well. Not a problem. We can put them both on arapahoevotes.com. So what I will do right now is I'm going to have Tom go ahead and sign us off of Facebook and stop recording. But if you three would just stay on for a second, I just want to make sure we talk about the, make sure that I get the email to you guys right and that you guys can get it back to me right. All right. So thank you everybody who's been watching.